Today we'll talk about what to do if your boyfriend insults your legs, if your mother-in-law keeps kissing your baby on the lips, managing a pregnancy after intentionally having unprotected sex, and more. Let's get started. The first thread is titled, Boyfriend Says Legs Look Gross. It's a nice day outside, so I was thinking about wearing a pair of shorts. I put on a pair that were kind of on the shorter side and was a little unsure about them. I asked my boyfriend if my legs looked gross from behind, and he said, if I'm being honest, yeah, you just got some weight on your legs. My feelings were obviously hurt, and he came to comfort me. I asked him if it's because you can see my cellulite, and he said no, but I feel like that was a lie. I put on long black biker shorts and asked the same question, and he said, no, I like those better, and said I just look better in black. Now, I can't get a straight answer out of him about him thinking cellulite is gross. Attached is the first pair I had on. There's a picture attached to this post that I won't be showing, so I'll keep reading now. Pic doesn't show as much cellulite as you can see in person, I don't think. I'm 30 weeks, 5 days today, so she's pregnant, and have gained 25 pounds so far. He has not done a good job of making me feel pretty in my pregnancy, and this just really hurt. I know cellulite is natural and normal, but I just don't feel good about him not thinking I look good. I don't know what to say to him about this. My knee-jerk, very first response to this is something along the lines of, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I think this is one of those really unfortunate situations where OP put herself in that situation herself. In terms of how she phrased it, especially I asked my boyfriend if my legs looked gross from behind. What that says to me as an external person to the situation is that you felt your legs didn't look great from behind. And then when he validated that impression, because it sounds like you are asking for an honest opinion, then you took it kind of personally and it hurt. And I completely understand, the rest of it. Of course, pregnancy is associated with a bunch of weight gain. You can't really avoid it when you're pregnant. Nor should you even want to, because it's absolutely necessary for the baby. But that comes, a certain amount of insecurity and a certain amount of self-consciousness comes with that is also, again, completely normal and completely legit. And I totally understand where she's coming from. But the question here is you kind of put your boyfriend in the position where he can't really win, and it's not very clear what exactly you expect or what you really want from him, other than an honest answer to the question. I don't think that he would have said, hey, by the way, or at least it comes across very differently if he were to just walk past you trying on a pair of shorts and said, hey, your legs look kind of gross in that, you should change. Like, that's a completely different type of comment and statement, and would be handled, or I'm sure you would respond to it very differently as well, versus this type of situation where you kind of ask directly for the feedback. And I think it's also okay to say, hey, you know what, those shorts just don't look very flattering on you. I think that's completely fair as an opinion. I don't think that's bad. What is clearly a problem here, what the OP is experiencing, and then it kind of ends up projected on this type of situation, is that she's just a little bit insecure. She says he's not done a good job of making me feel pretty in my pregnancy, and this just really hurt. And so I don't think that this is a situation that happens in isolation. I think it's probably connected to a bunch of previous situations that happened in the past. And it's this insecurity of just not feeling good in her body and not feeling confident, not feeling attractive to her partner that's coming out from this thread. And so OP, in future, what I would do if I were you would be, I wouldn't ask this question in this kind of way. Also, the fact that he says that you look better in black. Black is a naturally more slimming kind of color. And so I think that that's probably some aspect of that. If you're insecure about your weight gain, then don't ask direct questions about your weight gain when you can't do anything about it. Maybe wait until after your pregnancy and then start working on your weight and then see how you feel afterwards. That's what I would do, number one. Number two, if I simply just did not feel attractive, if I felt like my boyfriend or my partner or my husband didn't think that I was pretty for whatever reason, then this is kind of where the basis of that conversation should like that's where it should happen. It should not happen on this, oh hey, do you think cellulite looks ugly? Do you think my cellulite looks ugly? I think there you're having a very shallow conversation about a much deeper, much more vulnerable kind of issue. Let's skip ahead to some of the comments here, and you'll see that quite a bunch of people actually reply completely on OP's side for this. So the first comment says, wear the shorts and tell your boyfriend, unless he has a legitimate reason to comment, like your tag is out, your shirt is tucked in your underwear, you missed a button, he should keep quiet. Dealing with weight gain has been one of the hardest parts of this pregnancy journey for me, and I can't imagine having to go through it with a partner who makes it even harder. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't rock those shorts. And again, this would be a totally fair comment if you were just trying on a pair of shorts in your bedroom and your boyfriend walks past you and says, hey, well, those shorts are ugly. I think it's that then you can say, hey, unless your boyfriend has a legitimate reason to comment, then he should keep quiet. In this circumstance, you actually directly ask for the feedback. So I don't think that this is a very fair comment in terms of how your boyfriend approached this. Another response says, if you look quote unquote gross, then so do I. He should know better than to say something that's going to make you feel even more self-conscious about your body while you're literally growing another human. You should wear whatever you want and whatever makes you feel comfortable. It's getting too hot for me to give a hoot about other people finding my body appealing enough to be on display. I'm sorry he's making you feel bad about yourself. Of course, I don't want OP to feel bad about herself either. And the main part of this comment here that I really disagree with is he should know better than to say something that's going to make you feel even more self-conscious about your body. I don't think that men relate to their bodies and relate to feeling self-conscious in the same way that women do. I think that perspective is just a very, very feminine perspective. And a lot of women read this and can immediately relate to it. But I'm pretty sure that if I were to ask the exact same question to my husband, then he would also, and it didn't look flattering or whatever, then he would also be like, yeah, it's a terrible pair of shorts. Just get another one. So this was where you see like a complete difference in communication styles. And that's kind of one of the reasons that this conflict is happening. And the next comment says, what the hell, I would have decked him. A very over-the-top kind of response. I'm going to skip ahead to one comment, which I think is a little bit more on my side here, and read that out. I swear I'm not trying to be harsh, but for future reference, and I say this with kindness, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. If you were looking for reassurance or were looking for him to make you feel pretty, honestly communicating that and saying to him, babe, I'm having a bad self-confidence day. I just can't get my head together. I just want to feel pretty. Potentially could have been a more pleasant and reassuring conversation. But you asking, do I look gross in these shorts? And then getting upset when he says he doesn't think they look great doesn't make much sense to me. If you wanted him to lie to you no matter what the truth was, that means you were basically playing a mind game or trapping him. Just communicate. Tell him what makes you feel beautiful. Ask him why he doesn't compliment you. Admit you've been feeling insecure. Have a vulnerable conversation rather than asking a question and then melting down when he answers it. And that, I think, is a perfect summary of this question. It's kind of one of the reasons where sometimes asking for advice on the internet will actually give you pretty good advice. It is perfectly okay and legit to want to feel pretty and to want your boyfriend to validate that and to make you feel like you are attractive. There are certain ways to go about it, and this one was just a really unfortunate one for both parties. Our second story today is titled Mother-in-Law Still Doesn't Listen, and this is the one about the mother-in-law kissing the baby on the lips repeatedly. She starts with, again, back to the kissing on the lips rant. I had a conversation with mother-in-law months ago about kissing my baby on the lips and started a discussion on here asking for advice, opinions, etc. I didn't find the original thread, but that's fine because we get to have this one instead. I truly believe she's trying to challenge me. It freaks me out why she can't just listen or respect my decision, even if it's not what she would do. The very first time we met up after the conversation, she made a point of asking, oh, can I kiss her? Although I said yes, just not on the lips. I felt like she was making a point of being sarcastic. Seeing as I never said she's not allowed, I just kindly said from now on, please refrain from kissing her on the lips. Anyway, she kissed my baby on the head, and that was that. Since then, I've seen her kiss her many times on the lips. It hasn't always been the best place to pull her up on it, but I feel regretful I haven't stood my ground sooner. She even makes a point of going for her lips and puckering up her lips to encourage it. She even told my sister-in-law, kiss her. She wants you to kiss her on the lips. This in front of me, probably taking the mick out of me as they both know how I feel about it. I did say no, she doesn't kiss on the lips. And I kid you not, she got onto her knees and kissed her 3 times on the lips. So as we walked to the door, I confronted her and she said, no, I kiss her on the cheek. As I turned around to say, well, I've seen you do it many times now, I caught her pulling faces to my little one. She deliberately tried to make a fool of me. And when I texted her afterwards to remind her, her response was, thanks for the reminder. I feel like I did kiss her on the cheek. She is such hard work. And so, OP, this is one of those perfect examples where if you give someone an inch, they take a mile. I personally find it a little bit weird even when parents kiss their kids on the lips. This is not something that's culturally appropriate or acceptable in my background, not something that I saw pretty much for my entire life. I remember the very, very, very first time I saw it was when I was about 11, 12 years old, and one of my classmates was dropped off by his mum, and then his mum kissed him on the lips goodbye at school. And I remember even back then finding that just a little bit strange. Never mind grandparents or any other extended family, which would make me feel even more awkward. So I get where OP is coming from. I wouldn't be very comfortable with this. I wouldn't like seeing it, and I would definitely want her to stop doing it. What I think OP is getting wrong here is that you are way too passive. This is not one of those statements that you need to have multiple conversations with your mother-in-law about. This part where she's done it multiple times in front of you and you haven't said anything about it, and now you're regretting that. That is 100% the reason why she's continuing to do it, because she has no reason to take you seriously. The part that makes me really angry, I think this is what really grinds my gears, is where I would go a bit insane, is when she says, I tried to talk to her about it, and then as I turned around, I noticed that she was pulling faces at my little one. And I know that there's a certain amount of debate here. Like you could argue that she was just, playing with the kid. Fine, fair enough, because babies like it when you pull faces at them. But if she is pulling faces kind of along the lines of, look how ridiculous your mom is being, I would find that so completely disrespectful and out of line. And I don't think that this is the type of interaction between mother and mother-in-law that should be happening in front of a baby. So that's not cool. Ultimately, the answer is you need to grow a little bit of balls and to really step in. I don't know why your husband is in this scenario. I don't know why he's not involved. But if I felt that my mother-in-law was ignoring something that I asked her to do multiple times, then I would have involved my husband, and I'm pretty sure he would have stepped in. So it's one of those situations where I don't know what you've tried to do to make her stop. It doesn't sound like you've tried to do very much. I also don't think that trying to text her afterwards is sufficient, because no one takes texts that seriously. You need to actually sit down and talk to her about it not being okay and not being acceptable. And if she doesn't stop doing it, there will be some kind of consequence in terms of how much time you're spending with her. That's how I would deal with this situation. Good news is that's actually pretty much most of the internet as well. The first comment says, she doesn't listen because you don't call her out in the moment or enforce consequences. It's always the right time to call someone out if they are crossing a previously stated boundary. Stop giving her access to your child. Now, again, I don't think you need to be, go completely extreme, but definitely there's a huge difference in terms of communication styles and how firm you are and how clear it comes across that you're not kidding. This is actually this is not something that you're going to let fly. And I think if you have this history where people are not taking you seriously, then you do need to make it clear that there will be some kind of consequence. Now, one person replies to this one saying she needs consequences for being disrespectful too. I think a timeout is well overdue. I think a squirt bottle may even be in order. And I would argue that that's it's funny, but a pretty childish way to imagine dealing with the situation. One of those statements that you make on the internet because you're like, wouldn't that be amazing? But it's not actually helpful as a suggestion. This one comment as well, I want to read out. She says, she does what you allow, embarrass her in front of everyone, stop letting her see your child. She's being outright disrespectful to your face. I think this embarrass her in front of everyone comment is honestly a little bit over the top as well. I don't think it's a huge deal to just sit down and talk to her about it. And again, if she's not taking it seriously, involve your husband in it. And then if she's still not taking it seriously, then you can take further action, but there's no reason to go for public humiliation. What does upset me a little bit about these types of threads, there will always be at least one person who kind of draws some kind of parallel or connection to sexual assault, or at least insinuates it. And that's this last comment here. First, long no contact, like add a week or a month for every kiss on the lips, which I think is a ridiculous way to interact with kids. And then she says, by the way, the thought of a grown adult kissing a child on the lips makes me throw up in my mouth. I would definitely not want my child to think that kissing on the lips is normal. I would not allow kisses ever again anywhere, not even on the head. Also, no alone time ever. I would, by the way, have no problem embarrassing her. I once saw my husband's aunt kiss her 13-year-old child on the lips. He didn't want it. She pushed him to the walls and kissed him on the lips in front of everyone. I almost vomited. It was so disgusting. Don't let it come that far. And I 100% agree with this person. That does sound like a pretty awful scenario, and especially with the 13-year-old. The 13-year-old is more than old enough to be able to say, hey, what the hell? And this kid clearly was like, hey, what the hell? I'm not into this. So that's pretty horrific. I'm really sad to read about situations like this. But I think that the comparison to sexual assault is always just used a little bit too lightly. And maybe that's something that we should all be a bit more careful about, and not make that comparison without it necessarily being part of what's going on here. So yes, do not let your mother-in-law kiss your baby on the lips. Unless you want to, I guess, which I don't think anyone does. Our third thread of today is, we never used protection. Now I'm the bad guy. My child's father and I have been friends and bandmates for 6 years. We were best friends in the band. Last year, we unexpectedly shifted things into a far more intimate relationship. Things progressed quickly, and we both were seemingly head over heels. We had tons of ups and downs, but nothing to make us leave each other alone for good. From the first time we were intimate, we never used protection, and after about the third time, he never pulled out. I was not on birth control, and that was known. We both knew the risks and actually made jokes about our careless actions. Fast forward, and I found out that I'm pregnant a few weeks ago, and all hell has broken loose. He's angry that I want to keep the baby and says this is going to negatively impact his life. I already have children. This is his first, so I understand the fear, but he's basically said that I did this on purpose. I'm so confused because I don't know where my friend of 6 years has gone. He shows no care for me at all, just anger and blame in my direction. When I point out that we're very much adults, well into our 30s, and knew the potential consequences of our actions, he disregards it and says I'm showing a lack of care towards him by going through with something he doesn't want. I miss being with him very deeply, but not enough to not have our baby. Am I the bad guy? This is a pretty horrific situation, in my opinion, for almost everyone involved here. And I will say very explicitly and directly, I actually do think OP is the bad guy in this situation. At least she's not the only bad guy. Definitely both of them are to blame. But all the responsibility for the situation is not on the child's father. And yes, of course, you can argue, and this is a fair argument. You can argue that they were both adults. They both decided to engage in intercourse, knowing full well what the potential consequences of that were. But it was an irresponsible act from both sides. Like, she would not have gotten pregnant had she not agreed to be in that situation. And what I really find kind of horrifying about this situation is the statement that she says, we actually made jokes about it. And that's really sad, honestly. I don't know why you would why you would find it fun, why you would find the idea of bringing a child into the world funny, into a clearly unstable environment. We had ups and downs, but nothing to make us leave each other alone for good, which means, it was kind of an on again, off again type of relationship. So clearly not super stable. Not a great environment for a baby, a lot of irresponsibility in terms of continuing to engage in intercourse. I find it actually quite amusing because some people will say things like, hey, the chances of getting pregnant are not super high. if you even pay attention to your cycle at all. And yeah, if you are actually paying attention to your cycle and you do have a regular menstrual cycle, then maybe you can do some family planning to kind of get around that. But generally speaking, actually, if you're not using any birth control at all, and this is not something that you're really tracking and paying attention to, then the likelihood of you wanting to engage in sex during ovulation, i.e., during your fertile period in the menstrual cycle, is extremely high as a woman, because nature is interested in you having babies. And it's one of the natural things that happen over the course of intercourse. It's definitely something where your desires as a woman, his desires as a man, will match up and try to sync with the time in which you are fertile. So that you're at all surprised that you got pregnant kind of blows my mind. I don't understand how either of you are surprised that you got pregnant. And I feel already very sad for the child being born into this kind of environment, into this kind of relationship with when both parents seem to have zero consent for it. What is also extremely surprising to me is this statement. I point out that we're very much adults, we're both well into our 30s. I think this is a kind of lack of impulse control that I would kind of understand if it was coming from like a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old, people who don't have that level of forethought into the future where they can really imagine how their lives would change if they have kids. But definitely from people in their 30s is kind of embarrassing. And then what makes it even worse is the statement, I already have children, but this is his first. Now, if you already have children and you have been with him for some time, have been having an intimate relationship with him for some time, then I'm assuming that you're probably a single parent or that you're co-parenting from a previous relationship. And so you already understand the consequences of having kids in an unstable environment. You already understand what it's like for them. And to, again, put a second child or a third child or however many other children you have, to put another child into that relationship when you could very easily avoid it, completely blows my mind. That you both knew the risks and decided to joke about it instead of really sitting down and having a deep in-depth conversation with each other about what to do if you happen to get pregnant. Just it boggles the mind. So as far as I'm concerned, I think both of you have your fair share of responsibility for the situation that you found yourself in. I do think his reaction is completely over the top, but I also think that he doesn't have to face the reality of you being pregnant the way that you have to face the reality of being pregnant as a woman. I think men are a little bit more removed from that, and it's much easier for them to be like, oh yeah, maybe this will happen at some point in the future, whereas you as a woman, it's going to happen to you. You're the one who's going to be carrying the baby, so you can't quite separate yourself from it in the same way. And maybe it sounds to me like you are a lot more aware of what that potential decision meant for you than he had any idea in terms of what it meant for him. Either way, the only way to move past this is to hopefully wait until the emotions calm down a little bit, until you've both had some time to process the situation, and then you can sit down and you can talk about things like co-parenting and where do you want to go from here. I would imagine actually that he might have some concerns about things like having to pay child support, etc. And those are the types of conversations that you should really have before you decide to get pregnant. And I do consider this deciding to get pregnant. One thing that I would touch on, the statement of it seems to me that he would like her to abort the child. I'm showing a lack of care towards him by going through with something he doesn't want. This is a pretty awful statement in and of itself. And the idea that if he did not want a child, then you should have used birth control. This is one of those situations where it's not that both parties did absolutely everything they could in order to not be pregnant, and now suddenly they're pregnant and they can't manage it. This is clearly one of those situations where people were extremely irresponsible coming into it, and now you have a child and you are duty bound and honor bound to raise that child to the best of your ability, I hope. To read some of the comments, the very first statement is, he sounds like a complete idiot. I wouldn't torture yourself and have these conversations with him anymore only to be insulted and manipulated. He knows how babies are made, right? Unfortunately, he's not acting like the man that you hoped he would be. I would stay well away from him and his anger right now, block his number and let him process it on his own. You're not his emotional punching bag. And yes, fair enough. He does sound a little bit like an idiot that he didn't understand that there was a risk of that happening and kind of come to terms with that and still made the decisions that he made is really sad and really unfortunate. But I would still argue that both parties are to blame. This is not a situation that you can say, oh, well, it's completely his fault that suddenly he doesn't want to have kids. Like, maybe you should have talked about having kids before you decided to have unprotected sex repeatedly. The second comment also says, no, you're not the bad guy. He's an idiot. And then she says, I think a conversation should have taken place, however, before getting pregnant, just to make sure you were on the same page. Yeah, maybe, just maybe that would have been a good idea. Then you get to the other side of the internet, the one that's a little bit closer to my opinion. You guys were 100% both trying to get pregnant under these circumstances. I'm trying to understand his surprise. Did he at any point ask you to go on birth control or express that he didn't want you to get pregnant? And then the next one says, you both did this on purpose. You have kids and he knows where babies come from. So this is a very unfortunate situation. I would hope that both parties somehow manage to find a way to come together and make a good life for that child, because it's really unlucky. Our next thread for today is titled, Boyfriend Missed Baby's First Bath. I'm so upset. I'm a first-time mom of a baby girl, and my boyfriend knew I had her first bath planned today at his sister's place. I had asked him if he'd be there to watch or to help even. I wanted it to be special. But instead, my boyfriend got drunk, spent most of the day with his best friend while I was alone with the baby most of the time. I asked him if he'd be there for bath time, and he said yes, he would. When I could finally give her a bath because I was waiting on help since I was nervous, he ended up being drunk, and he walked out of the room and decided to take his own bath. He said he'd step it up. He missed it all. Now he's passed out, and I'm exhausted taking care of her all night. He said he'd step it up, and tonight I just feel so crushed and hurt that he missed her first bath and that I'm alone to take care of her again. I feel like a single mom with how much I do alone for her. He already has twins, and I bet he was there for their first bath. I'm honestly devastated. I believe that this is one of those situations where you're kind of projecting your emotions about a different aspect of the situation that's kind of sad and unfortunate and that should be talked about, rather than the one that actually matters. The first bath may be special, like it might be something that some parents are really excited about. I kind of understand the perspective of, hey, you might be really nervous about it because babies are really small and fragile, and if it's the first time you do it, then you're scared about dropping them or hitting their head or whatever else might go wrong when you're having a bath. So I completely understand being nervous about it, wanting to have someone there present who can help you, or a second pair of hands that could make a huge difference. I completely get that. However, the statement, I wanted it to be special. I wanted him to be there just to watch. Honestly, baths are not that big of a deal. Like, I know it feels special when it's the first time that you're going through it. And again, some parents might react to it in that way where it feels like an event, but that he was not there for it, that he missed it, is not, it's not the same as him missing his baby's birthday or missing, their first school play or their graduation or whatever other meaningful giant events that happen in their lives where you want your parents to be present. So I would caution OP here to maybe not make that comparison and to not draw that, to not feel like this is a giant event that he missed, because it's very possible that he simply did not perceive the first bath as a really big deal. And for him, it was just, because you have baths quite often as a baby and as a grown-up, I guess. It's very possible that he just didn't think that it was a huge deal, that he wasn't there for it. What is a problem? There's two other problems. There are two problems here. The first one is you asked him for help. He said he would help, and then he didn't show up. The second one is he got drunk instead, which is a whole separate behavior. So it's not that he didn't show up because he was doing something else very important, like he was working and he couldn't, make it happen otherwise, and he still let you down, but he was doing something that was meaningful. He just got drunk and hung out with his friend. And actually, there is a third one that I would probably pick out. And the third problem is I feel like a single mom with how much I do alone for her, which says to me, not only did he not help you in this particular situation, but you feel abandoned, generally speaking, when it comes to looking after your child, that there's no partnership there. And those are then the three problems that are way more worth talking about and the ones that you need to actually cover. The fact that he missed the first bath is not that big of a problem, But the other three are things that are quite fundamental in terms of making promises that you don't keep, being responsible, and being a part of your baby's life, or being helpful as a dad, being a parent that's also involved in looking after them. And so, P, I don't know how you ended up in this situation where you had a baby with this person. I have no idea what your relationship with him is like. I don't know to what extent this is normal behavior versus abnormal behavior, and I have no idea what's going on with him. But I would definitely try to tackle those three issues, hopefully when he's sober, hopefully at a time when, you know, he's calm and you can have a really calm adult normal conversation about it. I would probably not say things like, hey, I thought you would be there for her bath and then you missed it, because there I think you're probably going in opposite directions. You're not going to be on the same page. But in terms of how can you be involved in looking after our baby? How can we look after our baby together? Can we maybe split or do shifts or whatever other system or method works for you? Maybe you can sit down together and come up with that. And then it's important to find out why he was out drinking. And I don't know where you were in terms of him deciding to go out drinking at this time, but to find out what's going on there and what's causing that. That would be my first response to this situation. The very first comment in response here says, I know as moms it's a big thing for us. For dads, not so much. They don't care. They don't see how important it is to us. So that's a statement that says, yeah, dads don't really perceive baths to be this giant event in their baby's life. And then this person follows up with, the real problem here is him not helping you. One person comments to that actually and says, our son's first bath was a big deal to my husband, not so much for myself. I'm looking forward to the later baths when the baby will actually enjoy them. So I guess that's another person who says, hey, maybe it's not a gender split, although I suspect it's mostly a gender split. But, you know, it's a personality difference. Like some people perceive different things to be special about the journey of having a baby, and that's completely fine and normal. And it's good to have different perspectives about that. This is now the point that where I think the real problems in this relationship come to light a little bit. One person replies to the thread, missing out on bath time is the least of your concern if your baby is young enough to be having their first bath and he was out getting blind drunk. He should be working or home. And OP replies, yeah, he broke his ankle irresponsibly and he never drinks like this, but he used to be an alcoholic bad. I can't believe he got wasted knowing that we have a 9-day-old to care for. We were supposed to get groceries too. I've been starving with breastfeeding. And there, it sounds to be very clear that there's quite a lot of problems happening within this relationship. I don't have a lot of advice for you, OP, in terms of how to move forward from here if you are really, like, if he really is an alcoholic. And it sounds like, well, whether he managed to quit alcohol at some point, it sounds like he's at least relapsing because he's getting very, very drunk. If he has a broken bone and he's on medication and he's also drinking alcohol, that's not very healthy. If you're not able to feed yourself, then that's also a problem. If you need more support and more help with a 9-day-old baby, which is a really, really, really tiny baby, then you have lots of problems in this situation. If I were you, I would probably try and see if I could get support from family or help elsewhere and try to separate yourself a little bit from the drunk boyfriend and to see if you can maybe get back on the same page there, if you can maybe stop drinking again or what's going on there. So that's a really unfortunate situation, very unfortunate scenario. Unfortunately, not about the first bath, and it's good to not project or to not confuse issues, to be very clear about what's actually a problem for you. Because then it's way easier to try and fix the problems that come your way when you can identify them properly. Our next thread for today is titled Need Advice. I'm always worried about the baby not getting enough. I'm a first-time mom with not much support. My little one will be 12 weeks this Thursday, and we've had a difficult start to breastfeeding. He's exclusively breastfed now, but we were combo feeding him with formula for the first 5 weeks. Since he's only been on breast milk, I'm constantly worried about him not getting enough. He takes anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes in total for a full feed, and I nurse him to sleep as well, so he always gets a little top up, which means I'm on breastfeeding duty pretty much all the time. During the day, he demands to be nursed around the clock, every 1.5 to 2 hours. Nights are a little better with 3 to 4 hour stretches. He does have 8 to 10 wet diapers in 24 hours, and he poops every other day. He's a very active baby, and I love him to bits. I keep seeing posts on this app about 10-week-old babies sleeping through the night and taking only 15 minutes to feed, and I can't help but wonder if my baby is getting enough milk. To be honest, on the tougher cluster feeding days, I feel like giving up and switching to formula, mostly to ease my own mind. Anyone else have a demanding baby who just won't leave the boob? How do you calm your mind? This thread is a perfect example of exactly how insidious and harmful social media can be, especially in the absence of babies, a variety of babies and a variety of other young mothers in your immediate environment. So if you assume, 50, 60, 70 years ago, every woman knew a bunch of other women who all had a bunch of other kids, right? So nowadays, the average number of babies per family, or like kids per family, is something like 2.5, depending on the country that you're in. But that's a pretty normal average. And so what that means is that people have way fewer interactions with babies. They don't quite understand exactly how different and how variable babies can be. Instead, what you have is the internet. And in the internet, specific outlier scenarios seem a lot more common than they actually are in real life. For example, the situation of a 10-week-old baby that's sleeping through the night and takes only 15 minutes to feed. Somehow, my gut says the most likely explanation for this kid would be that's a kid that's actually not nursing enough. That's a kid that may have problems with weight gain because they need to be eating more often than that. Because kids can't retain calories very well. And generally speaking, a 10-week-old, 12-week-old, 14-week-old baby should be nursing on average about every 3 hours. On average. So yes, so you might have some outliers there, once maybe they sleep for 4 hours, once maybe they sleep for 5 hours, even the fact that they sleep through the night. But then if they sleep through the night, then I would imagine that they're cluster feeding throughout the entire day. It is not normal at all. And yes, maybe there's 1 in a million babies that is actually naturally like that, and they're a perfectly happy, healthy baby. That may well be the case, but it's not normal. So I think social media really puts you in this situation, this position where you're comparing yourself to other people very closely. And then you keep thinking, hey, maybe my baby is just not normal. Because the majority of parents whose babies are in the normal range don't post about it. The ones who will post things are ones who are either on the extreme end on one side, where their babies are nursing really 100% of the time and not sleeping at all, and the ones on the extreme end on the other side, where their babies are sleeping a lot and barely nursing. And all the people in the middle who probably make up like 99% of the babies out there, or at least 95%, or maybe even 90%, those babies you probably won't hear about. So that's kind of sad, and I think one of the most harmful things about social media as a parent. What is also a little bit rough here is I think that there's a certain lack of education in terms of really being able to judge what does enough look like in terms of how you eat. And I suppose that there's also a certain amount of an assumption that biology is the same as maths. Like if you know that your baby is eating or drinking this much milk, 3 ounces of milk every 3 hours, every day, then you can be confident that your baby is still getting enough food, which is fair enough. However, it's also very possible that maybe your baby has digestion problems. So even though that they're nursing enough, maybe they don't have the right, maybe they don't have as many diapers. Maybe their weight gain isn't where you want it to be. Maybe they have too many diapers, like the food is just flushing through their system without actually being absorbed or used. There are so many things that could go wrong, and being able to rely on your own observation as a parent and as a mother, and your intuition and instinct as a mother makes such a huge difference. If you look at these descriptions here, when she says he does have 8 to 10 wet diapers in 24 hours and he poops every other day, he's a very active baby and I love him to bits. So if your baby isn't angry, if he isn't upset, if he is gaining weight, if he does have wet diapers, if he does have poopy diapers, these are all things, if his skin looks normal because skin gets a lot less supple when they're dehydrated. There are all these other behavioral aspects where you can really look at your baby and you can tell if there's something wrong. You can see how they're interacting with you, and you will be able to tell. I think not having that faith and not having that belief as a mother is a really sad thing. And I'm pretty sure that it's caused primarily by a lack of education and a lack of understanding how things work, how bodies work. You have to understand that there is a certain natural way that our bodies regulate themselves, and this is one of those. This is one of those ways. Like your baby will tell you when they're hungry. You will know that something is wrong. Even if you don't know exactly what is wrong, you will know that something is wrong. An example that I would use is, if you say the average adult person should eat between 1,800 to 2,200 calories per day. That's a very broad range. Let's say if you take someone on slightly the smaller end of the scale, let's say 1,800 calories per day. Even if you count calories, there's enough natural variation in the food that you're eating that you will never be able to hit exactly 1,800 calories a day. And that being a round number also doesn't mean that every single day you need to eat 1,800 calories, because some days you might spend, 3 hours outside in the winter, suddenly you're cold, your body had to use up a lot more calories just to keep you warm. You come back home, you want to eat a giant meal. A lot of things happen and your body just naturally regulates because it knows what it needs based on what's going on, based on the circumstances that you're feeling. The exact same way that you as an adult feel hungry, babies feel hungry too. Their bodies will also naturally regulate. So I find it really sad that people end up in these types of situations where they have this really intense anxiety and this really intense fear and this very neurotic need to control every aspect of what's going on with their baby with absolutely zero trust and faith and belief in the natural process and our body's ability to figure things out. And then the part that really kind of final nail in, she says, to be honest, on the tougher cluster feeding days, I feel like giving up and switching to formula, mostly to ease my own mind. Now, I don't want to get into the debate about formula versus breastfeeding right now, but I will say that I do think breastfeeding is the ideal. If you can breastfeed, I would 100% under all circumstances breastfeed for as long as possible, for as much as possible, because breastfeeding is the ideal. That doesn't mean that formula doesn't have room or a space, especially in our societies today, because lots of other things are going on. So I understand why formula is necessary for people. But just a statement, I mostly want to switch to ease my own mind, I think is just super sad. Like, I think it's really, really sad to feel so stressed out about the situation that you're like, hey, the only way that I can deal with this anxiety is if I switch to feeding my baby formula instead. And formula is a less ideal food source for a baby than your breast milk is. And then you'll see actually in the comments, this is one of the statements that really resonates with people, that people pick up on. So I'll read the first comment. She says, sounds like you're doing everything right. I completely understand being concerned if baby's getting enough. I think the 10-week-old babes sleeping through the night are unicorn babies and hard not to compare to. I don't remember feeds reducing to 15 minutes until about month 4 for us. Do what is best for you and baby. If easing over to formula is going to help your peace of mind so you can be a happier parent, do that. If you need to know that this is very common what you're experiencing so you can have the motivation to continue, that's okay too. And so obviously I agree 100% with what she says at the beginning. Yes, those babies are unicorn babies, and it is hard not to compare yourself to them, and it's not normal that babies only nurse for 15 minutes at 10 weeks old either. And I kind of agree with the statement, do what's best for you and baby, but if easing over to formula is going to help your peace of mind so you can be a happier parent, then do that. I think that this is the wrong solution for this person, because it doesn't sound to me like she wants to switch to formula because breastfeeding is so incredibly stressful for her, because she's really not producing enough milk, she's really struggling with the amount that her baby is needing to nurse. It really doesn't sound like that. It just sounds like she's a little bit nervous and she just needs a little bit of reassurance. And the immediate jump to, well, maybe just switch to formula and that will help you feel better is a really sad one. And you'll notice here the second comment is actually also very similar. She says, when I breastfed my boy barely slept through the night. He would wake 4 to 5 times. Now he's on formula. He sleeps 10 to 12 hours without waking, but he drinks a lot during the day. He drinks 7 ounces every 3 hours. Formula definitely got me more sleep, but still sad that I didn't breastfeed a bit longer. And so this to me sounds like encouragement to formula feed when it might not be necessary, even though she also says, I'm still sad I didn't breastfeed for a bit longer. It's the implication is, oh, look how amazing it is to feed formula because he is able to sleep a lot longer. And for what it's worth, this is also very variable. So some babies will sleep longer on formula. Some babies will sleep pretty decently on breast milk. Some babies will also still have a rough time on formula for a lot of other reasons. So you cannot make these kinds of recommendations or these kinds of statements and kind of run with them. There's a lot more nuance there, and every baby is different. Every baby is unique. Every mother is unique. So, OP, maybe try to be a little bit less neurotic. Maybe try to be a little bit less anxious and trust that you will know if there's something wrong with your baby because you will see it in their behavior. And now we come to the final thread of the day, which I think is a really positive one to end on. This one is titled, "So is this my life now?" Everywhere I turn, I feel like shit for the decisions I make and the way I raise my child, especially on the minefield that is the internet. And he's only a baby. Is this just being a parent? Never-ending uncertainty and paralyzing fear that you're doing it wrong and probably permanently harming or at least hindering your child, even though you love them more than life? Ugh. I'm just trying my best. I hope I'm doing the right things. I'm full of love, but flawed. How do we live day to day with the knowledge that we're likely making mistakes that affect an impressionable whole other human? Second-time parent, can you reassure your girl? I hope my boy is a forgiving person. And phew, in this moment, I'm thankful that I've always understood my parents were imperfect and told them so. They made mistakes, but can't begin to fathom the sacrifices they made. Creating life and then sustaining it is the greatest act of faith and bravery I can think of. The weight of it feels heavy today. Now, I think the title of this thread, "So is this my life now?" sounds so much more kind of derogatory and down than the actual content of the thread itself, where I would say that yes, actually, as a parent, you should have a certain amount of insecurity about what you're doing, because that's humility. That's what that's where humility comes from. If you are 100% convinced that what you're doing is right all the time, then you're most likely not going to be a good parent. I think having some amount of self-consciousness, of self-assessment, of self-reflection, and seeing what's working and what isn't, and questioning yourself about, hey, are you making really the best possible decisions for your baby, is healthy. Now, obviously, this is within reasonable amounts. And the internet kind of makes everything so much worse, because all of a sudden you think that everything is a much bigger deal. You're like, oh my God, if I do this, and my baby's going to never be the same ever again. We do underestimate quite how resilient babies are, quite how resilient bodies are as well. Like in terms of, if you ever drop your baby, a lot of people will be like, oh my God, I dropped my baby. Is my baby going to be okay? Obviously, I'm not advocating for dropping your babies. Don't drop your babies. But chances are that very often they will be fine. Chances are all of these little events that happen seem and feel a lot bigger and a lot more important to you as a mother, especially as a first-time mother, than they will be to your baby, who's going to grow to be a happy, healthy child. And so get rid of the paralyzing fear. You don't need to be completely paralyzed with fear about it, but it's okay to question, hey, am I making the best possible decisions for my child? And I really love this statement at the end: creating life and sustaining it is the greatest act of faith and bravery I can think of. I would agree with that to a large extent. I think that there is the act of faith comes from the belief that life has meaning, that life is valuable, that life is worth living, that the life that you can create for your kids and for their future kids is going to be equally as joyful as hopefully your life is. And yes, there's definitely a certain element of bravery in terms of belief in yourself and your ability to manage things as well. So I think this is an awesome thread. I think this is an awesome question. This is one of the reasons why going on forums like this can sometimes be a really encouraging and a really motivating experience. I will pull up some of the things that people say in response to it. The very first person says, if you feel like your anxiety is overwhelming you, you should definitely reach out to a doctor. Which, I mean, I did not read overwhelming anxiety from that comment, but maybe other people did. So I guess fair enough. If you really cannot function because you're so anxious, then yes, that's a problem. You shouldn't have to be worried or questioning yourself every second. I had major anxiety my whole life before baby, but for some unknown reason, it's mostly gone, at least when it comes to her. I just know that she's going to be fine. And that's awesome. Babies don't need us to be perfect, she says. And this is correct. Babies do not need us to be perfect. One comment that I found actually quite amusing. She says, I'm just a first-time mom, but between talking to my mom friends and then reading parenting books during pregnancy, it is very clear to me that no one has it figured out, and there is no right way for anything. I find a lot of comfort in that. I think there's actually also, just to comment on this a little bit, there's actually a lot of additional complication just the moment that you understand that babies are different, even when you have baby 1, baby 2, baby 3, they're all going to be extremely different from each other, and that you as an individual are also different from other mums, and even you at different stages in your life. So maybe you at the time that you have your first kid are a very different person, have very different needs from the time that you have your second kid. So all of the different methods that there are to parenting and all of the different ways there are of doing things, and whether you sleep or whether you sleep train or whether you co-sleep, whether you bed share or whether you do baby-led weaning or whether you feed purees, like all of these varieties that come up that there are kind of factions for on the internet, and some people do it this way and then argue against the others. There's probably room for all of them, and there's room for a million more. And there's a million other cultures out there where people do things even more differently. And so it's just understanding that, of course, there's never going to be a right way for everyone at every point in their life. Like, that's never going to be possible. So parenting is all about finding the things that work for you and for your kids. That's a good learning to take from this. But then she says, quote, "As a final note, I met a mother of 6 last year during my 3rd trimester. She said, 'I'm going to give you a piece of unsolicited advice. In motherhood, set your bar low. Any day that ends with your child or children alive, that's a great day, and you did amazing.'" Now that, I think, is completely over the top. You don't need to go quite that low. There's a lot that you can do to harm your kids that's, they can still be alive, but they're actually not doing that great. So maybe don't take that as a learning from this. And I don't think that this was intended, like she says. She said it because being a parent is hard. I mean, yes, but if your measure of success is my child is still alive at the end of the day, then that's not a very great success. So I just wanted to make that point because I agree with the general gist of this thread. And I think that most of the comments and the statements that people make here are great and things that you can take a lot from as a new parent. But you can set yourself a high bar and try and aim for that. And there's no shame in that either. Thanks so much for listening today, and see you next time.